Welcome to Module 6A, Credit for Child Independent Care Expenses. By the end of this module, you will understand the credit for child independent care expenses, understand the 5 qualifying tests for eligibility to claim the credit for child independent care expenses, and finally, understand the form used to claim the credit and where the credit appears on the Form 1040. This module is broken down into 5 topics: the credit for child independent care expenses, taxpayer eligibility requirements, determining the amount of the credit, a recap, and then a knowledge check. So let's dive in to the credit for child independent care expenses. This credit allows taxpayers to reduce income tax by a percentage of their total child independent care expenses. This credit is non-refundable and has the potential to reduce one's income tax to 0. Keep in mind that it cannot reduce other taxes or increase a refund. The credit ranges from 20 to 35% of the taxpayer's qualifying expenses. The credit is based on amounts paid for the care of a qualifying person. A qualifying person can be any one of the following: child under 13, spouse who is unable to provide self-care, or a dependent who is unable to provide self-care. So let's go into eligibility. There are 5 tests to determine a taxpayer's eligibility to claim the child independent care credit. 1. The qualifying person test. Must have a qualifying person. 2. The earned income test. They must have earned income. 3. The work-related expense test. Care must be to enable the taxpayer to work. 4. The joint return test. Married taxpayers must file a joint return. And 5. The provider identification test. The taxpayer must provide the name, address, and tax identification number of the care provider. Note, all 5 tests must be satisfied by the taxpayer to claim the credit. So let's work out how to determine the right amount of the credit. How is the credit determined? Form 2441 must accompany any returns claiming the credit for child independent care expenses. Taxpayers must provide the eligible expenses for the child independent care. The credit is claimed on Schedule 3, non-refundable credits. The resulting credit amount is transferred to Form 1040, line 12. You can see the calculation table on the right, but note the software will calculate the amount of the credit for you. So let's recap. The credit for child independent care expenses allows taxpayers to reduce income tax by a percentage of the total paid during the year for child independent care. It's a non-refundable credit that reduces a taxpayer's income tax liability by a percentage of the total paid for child independent care. There are 5 qualifying tests that must be met to be eligible to claim the credit: the qualifying person test, the earned income test, the work-related expense test, the joint return test, and the provider identification test. Form 2441, credit for child independent care expenses, is used to claim the credit. The resulting credit amount is claimed on Schedule 3 and transferred to Form 1040, line 12. If you want to check out some additional resources, you can go to Publication 4012 or Publication 4491. Up next, Module 6B,